Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jaw and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to another episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
So there's this post that has been going around from a person named Jason Haddock, who goes by the handle Jason Haddock on Twitter. And some of you might know him. He's a field CISO at Flare. He's a longtime pen tester. He sits on the Black Hat review board, and he just came back from his 16th DEF CON, and he wrote this really long essay that I wanted to kind of talk through.
Ironically, it's so long you need an AI summary.
Yeah. It's worth the read. I did read through most of it. I have to finish kind of the end part. But basically the TLDR is that there's a lot of people who left DEF CON saying that this was going to be like the real last DEF CON because, AI is going to take over hacking and it's going to eat the field and cybersecurity is cooked. And Haddock here makes a lot of really good points that I kind of wanted to talk through. And this is a conversation I think a lot of people are having in, like around the water cooler and Slack, Discord servers. And so I think it's just a really interesting podcast topic to walk through. So I know that Adam is going to have a lot of hot takes here. This whole thing is a long hot take, essentially.
Yeah, he brought the heat.
So he starts off with his first point, and really the whole thing, he's like, okay, his whole point is that it's not like cybersecurity is not cooked. It's not, it is not going to be the end of cybersecurity as we know it or hacking as we know it. And he starts off with the security research. And I think that's kind of important because like in general, people think that AI is going to take over, like, finding vulnerabilities and some, you won't have any creativity in submitting anything else. And with him sitting on the review board and seeing all the submissions coming in, he gets to read a bunch of them. And even though AI did show up and it's doing some of the work, the original insight that people have into the bugs and everything still have humans behind the seat and noticing something weird and refusing to drop that. And so the bottleneck for him was never ideas. Every good researcher has a notebook full of hunches that they don't have time to chase down. And then AI just kind of collapsed the cost of chasing that. So, we're going to get into more of this, but in this case, the first one is people are worried, especially with DEF CON, on these like the new like bugs and research and whatnot, and they think it's going to go away. But AI is kind of just reducing the time to finding new things rather than like taking over it. Your thoughts on that, Adam?
I think this is such a great point to start with because it's completely the reality on the ground in multiple industries, not just this one, but I think in almost all of them. And people sometimes confuse the grind with what the actual value of their work is. Let me explain. I was very early in career, right as Office 365 came to market and Exchange Online with it. And I worked at a couple of organizations that were both Lotus Notes shops. And at one of them, we evaluated Office 365, and one of the other administrators had a very negative visceral reaction. This person is what we would colloquially describe as a server hugger. They want to be able to go hug the server in the data center that sits right next to where their cubicle is. They want to know where it is. And they valued their job in, well, I do the DR exercise. I take the backups. I install the patches. I maintain the databases. They saw that as their job. And so they wrapped up an enormous amount of value in doing things like DR exercises and patching and updating and care and feeding of Exchange Server or Lotus Domino. That is not the value of that at all. The value is delivering reliable collaboration tools for your company. And people made the mistake of thinking that If I'm an exchange administrator, my value is doing those things. No, it is not. It's delivering the tools that my company needs to operate. And so I think a lot of cyber defenders are confusing that work between I have a hunch on where there might be a vulnerability and proving it out, the grind work as their value. And it's not. Doing repetitive stuff, doing non-value add stuff in whatever industry you come from is not the value of your job or what you do. And we need to look for any opportunity where there's grindy stuff and get rid of it. I'll give an example from my own world. In sales, you have to maintain what's called a pipeline, which is a representation in a CRM system that can show here's what money we've actually made, here's our target, and here's how we're going to get there. Here's what we're going to sell to get from point A to point B. And then you have a lot of contractual exercises that happen. Customers do things around their contract anniversaries that I don't need to get into on here, but you need that all accurately captured in the pipeline as well. That's the easy money because it's contractual. Customers have to spend that money. So you want that to be right. And that used to be, and still is for many sellers of Microsoft, a manual process. You have to go look at one system, capture what's there, and paste it effectively in another system. It's a copy-paste exercise. I have automated that. I have created automation that can go read the one system and can go automatically put it in the other. It was not a trivial effort to do, but that is not the value of my job. My job is not copying data from one system to another. And so I think in general, we have to get out of this mindset of the grindy stuff is my job. That is, and see, here's the one thing I'll give sellers a lot of credit for. Sellers intuitively understand that like grindy stuff is not my job because they push back on it really, really hard. And I think other technical roles, sometimes they relish in the grind. They relish in being in the weeds. And the thing is, and I know I'm such a broken record on this, guys, I apologize, but we got to let computers do what computers are good at. And so repetitive, iterative tasks, computers have always been good at that. We just haven't had a good way to get them to do those sorts of things where we cannot easily explain it in a very static rule set. When the rule set becomes more dynamic, we haven't had the tools to do that, and now we do. That's really all it is we've taught computers to respond to dynamic inputs and respond in a more consistent way to them because we can tell them how to respond to them. And that's no different than what we've always done with computing. We're ascribing like too much to this, when in reality, in some ways it can be really, really simple we're just teaching it how to respond to dynamic inputs with similar looking outputs, where we're translating that in a similar, maybe not exactly the same way every time. And so I agree. This is not a concern. This does not mean cyber is cooked. It does not mean cybersecurity research is no longer needed. It means we're accelerating the middle part that sucks, that nobody wants to do anyway. Well, some people think they want to do it, but I promise you that's not your value as a person. That's not your value as a cyber researcher. And the ones that have figured that out and figured how to automate that part, they're going to pull ahead. And so it's one of those, like, the tools have changed, but the task and the overall North Star has not. And so I agree with Jason Haddock here. This does not concern me in the least. And I'm excited to hear he's still seeing tons of novel research get submitted to DEF CON every year. That's exciting. So I realize I'm going to have to be more concise with my answers, or we're going to talk all night, Andy. But I think this one is such a fundamental point that we're going to reuse throughout the conversation. So I'll be long-winded here and then I'll be shorter from there. But this to me it's a new tool and it's being used by some people in the right way. And this is the part a lot of folks have been figuring out, is it doesn't do the end-to-end thing because it in many ways can't do new thinking. It can't do novel thinking. It can only do thinking it's seen before and maybe put it together in novel ways, sure, but there's still distinctly human parts to this. And I think that's going to be a theme as we unpack Mr. Haddock's comments throughout. So this is, again, not a red flag to me. It's a green flag.
Yeah. So these next 2 points are kind of tied together. He says that the new pipeline of talent is the strongest he's ever seen. And he has a nice story here about a 10-year-old walking up and solving like a prompt injection, capture the flag. But and that I think you said this, Adam, but like the reason why like entry level tasks were that way is because we didn't have a way to automate that sort of stuff. And so
We talked
now
about
we
that in the
do.
pre-show, right?
We did talk about that in the pre-show. Yeah.
That was not on air, but we were talking in the pre-show about, as I was reading through some of his essay, he was making the point that these entry-level jobs were effectively, we treated them as, oh, this is great training, ground for you. It really wasn't. It was like human-based automation. It was stuff we couldn't really automate, so we threw humans at it. And that really wasn't good for anyone. It doesn't really train people well for the other parts of the job. And again, it's like, it's not high value work that values human ingenuity. And sometimes we have in a capitalist society, and I'm not anti-capitalist by any means here, but sometimes we have this perception on we need to make people go grind to earn the right to go to the next level. And I don't think that's accurate. And it's why you're seeing a lot of this appreciation, things like the trades, because the trades see even someone entry level as deserving of doing the real work right away. They just need to be taught how. And so you have things like apprenticeships and on-the-job training programs, but it's not like you bring someone in to be an electrician, like, well, you just need to go watch an electrical meter for the next year to learn how to be an electrician. Like, no, that's BS. I'm going to teach you how the concepts of safety and wiring and how it works, and you're going to watch a master electrician work, and then you're going to do some of the job, and then you're eventually going to take over. Like, the way they teach people to do the thing is by doing the thing. And in cyber, we've kind of shoveled people off to the side and said, go watch a bunch of text scroll by, and that's how you're going to learn cyber. And it's not true. And so it's, I think he kind of makes that point as you make these two together, but I don't want to interrupt you kind of going through it, but we were talking about that in the pre-show a bit. So yeah, it didn't make it to air till right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And he does talk about bringing back apprenticeships in here, which I think is what you were talking about too. I think that would be good. We just don't have good training pipelines. And also, so he says,
because we didn't need it though.
True. Well, I would say we probably...
I take that back. We did need it, but it was one of those problems that hadn't bubbled to the surface because we had this artificial training pipeline that was actually a bogus training pipeline, but it gave us a place to throw people in cyber roles, level 1 cyber roles, which was, again, I don't think effective training at all, and was really just human-based automation.
Yeah. So he says like the training, the talent itself is still very good. And so that's positive. But he does say in all of this that the entry level kind of job that we have considered entry level for years is disappearing. But that doesn't mean it's the end of things. And I was talking with a friend who was in academia earlier today about this, and she was saying how professors are like just saying, okay, if you use AI, you're gonna fail. Very kind of similar to like back when you and I were kind of going through school and the calculator was around, and I saw a comedian say just recently, my math teacher growing up, she said that, I'll never have a calculator with me at all times. And so you got to learn arithmetic, right? He's like, joke's on her, because we walk around with one every day now. And so like, I think this is kind of the same with AI, is that we can't really, we have to kind of consider that next level. What does it mean to be entry level, and what does it mean to be kind of more level 2, level 3? And so like I was thinking about this today as we're talking about in academia, and also as I've been using AI, I've actually been kind of a curmudgeon Luddite when it comes to AI. I've had a later start than what a lot of people have, but now I'm starting to use it, especially as I've been building a brand new security lab for my new job here at Zscaler. And I have used AI a lot. And what I've come to realize is that my years of like kind of experience doesn't go away because AI is here now. I have found a new tool to accelerate and enable me to do things that I never were able to do before. But I'm more like judging, like if I was to judge someone on their use of AI, it's like, okay, well, not like what did you do with it, but like what is the end result? Like you had a vision And that, I think, may be the toughest thing sometimes, because I started off like seeing what people were building in it with AI. I was like, wow, that's like, I don't even know the first place to start what to do. But then as I was starting to build my thing here, I realized how powerful the tool is, in the fact that it enables me to do things like today, just for fun. I deployed a SIM.
Does this guy
in
know
my
how to
lab.
party or what?
Yeah, for fun, I deployed Graylog in my lab environment and forwarded my firewall logs from Unify to it. And that was not an easy task, because I deployed it as a Docker with Docker Compose, which I had no idea what it was before, which is something that you like write up, and it like deploys 3 Dockers at the same time, has like an underlying private network that talks to each other, certificates. It's like this whole thing, orchestration tool that deploys 3 Dockers that talk to each other at the same time. I never knew that existed. And Graylog needs like a MongoDB database. It needs like logs and all this other stuff, and the Docker itself to run the SIM. And so anyways, long story short, I think we need to change how we view skill and how we verify skill, which is kind of what Haddock's talked about here, is that instead of just saying, like, show me how to close a ticket or something like that, like, change it to like how, like, as you read through like a report or something that like AI has written for you, like use that to kind of talk about what you think is the underlying technique or the specific IOCs, or maybe map that to your organization, and maybe then design a playbook to kind of encode those patterns into like your organization, right? So like, for example, I got an alert in Graylog already, and now my next thing is, okay, well, what am I going to do with that alert, right? And so I'm going to write a playbook to, do some sort of orchestration to, either resolve it or alert me or whatever. So I think that the goalposts need to move, just because the entry level kind of, ticket person or SOC alert person is going away, because we're going to automate that. We're just going to need to move the goalpost and kind of assess our entry level folks on a different level.
100%. And organizations it's going to be an imperative to do this, because if they don't, they're cutting off the bottom rungs of the ladder and preventing people from climbing up that ladder and new people joining the pipeline. And that will be devastating to you with time. So just because you can automate entry level roles in this business, and many others will be impacted as well, this is going to be a common thread throughout many industries. Is, hey, this is great. We're effectively, I mean, like, I don't mean to be like too highfalutin here, but in some ways we're going to take away, human suffering's the wrong word, but people doing really miserable work, and replacing it with more interesting, high value work with time. But we have to consider how we do that without cutting off our talent pipeline. And yeah, I talked about things like apprenticeships and that kind of concept. And organizations are going to need to be thoughtful about this. I don't have the solution today. Honestly, human resources and talent acquisition is certainly not my strong suit. So it's not my place to tell other people how to do that. I just know we're going to need to be thoughtful about it. And some of the same things we've done in the past aren't going to be effective in the future. And we have been critical, I think, across our industry, and places will do things like, I've seen the new joke, Andy. We've been critical of requiring insane amounts of experience to apply for a job. The new one is like, must have 10 years of experience working with ChatGPT or other AI-like models. Like,
Yeah.
Things have, of course, been around for 4 years. It's hilarious. And of course, there's HR drones already pulling that crap. So we'll need to see more of that. And by the way, just, you made a point earlier around maybe being a little late to the AI game in your perception. And I think that's going to roll into our next point here, where a lot of the people talking about this stuff are truly in a bubble. And you're going to unpack this more in a second. But every time you see one of these like hyperbolic articles on Twitter that AI is going to eat all the jobs and is going to do all these things, it's usually written by some person who works for a startup And startup people have literally never understood the complexity of the enterprise. Many of them have never worked in an enterprise, and they don't understand the complexity with them. Because if you go look around the modern enterprise today, sure, they're trying to adopt AI. They're trying to figure it out. But you cannot comprehend how siloed these organizations are, how disparate their technology platform is, how demanding their controls are for things like audit and governance and risk and regulatory environment and everything else that comes with it. And so startup people or people in a bubble in the tech industry grossly oversimplify what is really going on. And because that's all they hang out with all the time, all their friends are talking in the same way. Oh, I use AI 90% of my day. Who even needs a desk anymore? I just use voice mode and chat GPT to do all my work. And it's completely unrealistic. But before we get into that point, I just want to go back to something you said too. I mentioned how I was able to automate a process of taking activities that happen around a customer's contractual anniversary and basically automating, putting them into the sales pipeline. I was able to do that because I have 10 years of experience with that tool. I know what people do. I know how it actually works. I know all of the business logic around it. I know that this thing is due not 1 month before, but 31 days before, because there's a distinction and that can move things across quarterly boundaries. I understand that. I understand that the source of truth for all these are things that customers place called reservations, and where reservations are stored, what system of record they come from, and how you calculate them. And what do you do if this price is missing? And what do you do if that's missing? And how do you handle this scenario? And oh, an account executive did that. How should I handle that? What's my failure model? Like being able to build all that logic into it effectively requires a decade of experience, which is why very few people have, as far as I know, no one's built this. So just because like I can build that for me, look, I didn't have to write code. Thank goodness, because I can't. But I still had to be able to describe and test again and point out where it's wrong and where it's making the wrong assumptions and doing all the things. And it still requires a very deep sense of the business logic, the business rules, the actual implementation details, the limitations of the system. So these are not shortcuts, right? That's where the human knowledge still really matters. And even if you have this written out, like, oh, well, here's all the business rules written out in a markdown file that you could absorb into AI Model X, guess what? You're still missing the ground truth on how do people actually follow the business rules, because they don't always follow them one-to-one. People are, imperfect. And so anyhow, you were talking about building some of that stuff for your lab and using it to help you, but you were talking about how you still needed a lot of the knowledge on how it all is supposed to fit together and how it's supposed to work and how this connects to that. And of course, it simplified some of it, but it still requires a great deal of knowledge and technical know-how to implement. And I kind of felt the same way when I built my thing. So was just relating to that as well. But we should get back to the point on the bubble. And you were going to unpack that a little more.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the panic articles, right? Like you said, Adam, they're made by the top 1% technologists who are early adopters. They're already running like custom agent harnesses and frontier models, like tooling that they've built themselves. But I'm going to read this part that he wrote verbatim because I think this really is kind of his point here. So and it's really good. He says he spent a lot of time in consulting, and he said the median enterprise I walked into is not debating agentic security automation. They are miles behind even the average DEF CON attendee. They're still fighting for asset inventory. They're still trying to get MFA rolled out past executive exemptions. They're running end-of-life software they can't patch because the vendor went under in 2019. And their AI adoption is block ChatGPT domain and a policy PDF nobody reads. So
yep. I was kind of making that point too without even knowing exactly the pull quote you were going to provide, but I made some of those same points, right? Of people in that space, in that bubble, they don't comprehend what an enterprise looks like in reality. And it's not that people in enterprises don't care or don't want to be better. It's just they're hamstrung by so many limitations. I mean, being in enterprise IT is pushing a rock uphill the entire time, because you're often seen as this cost center. You're not seen as an enabler. You're seen as a blocker. and you're just not given sufficient resources to do your job. And then you also have a lot of people in IT whose job seems to exist to just slow everyone else down. Like there are people in things like asset management and honestly, cybersecurity and like end user training who are all like want to help, but to justify their own existence, they slow everything down. Like we have an overly complex procurement process because we want to make sure it's super duper fair. So we need to run this through an RFP. But RFPs are slow and they're ineffective ways of comparing real world technology that's built in a platform. We need someone to write user facing training material for every single thing we're going to implement into production that nobody ever reads. And so we're going to publish pages upon pages of PDFs that no one will ever look at and may get printed out and just, light trees on fire effectively. And so there's just a lot of mouths to feed that slow everything down. So I think the bubble thing is super accurate, and just the modern enterprise wants to adopt this, and they will, and they'll take huge advantage of it. But they're nowhere near like just point the model at it and it can reason over all these sources. To your point, Andy, a lot of their data is probably locked up in some proprietary system that's been out of support for 7 years and will never have an MCP server. And you go, oh, we'll just vibe code a new solution. And I mean, that gets into a whole, we don't have time to discuss today, but keep in mind, enterprises still do like having enterprise support. They like having SLAs and a throat to choke and a support person to call when something doesn't work. And vibe coded software is none of that. It's like back to the old days on, who wrote this line of business app we all rely on? Oh, yeah, John, and he got hit by a bus 10 years ago. And we just keep using it as is ever since. Like, that's all vibe coding's going to do. Like, are we kidding? It's going to be back to the same old thing when some guy wrote this business critical app in Visual Basic. It's not the end all be all. Can it solve some use cases? Absolutely. Will it put some SaaS providers out of business? Absolutely. But it is not the end all be all. And so that's the other part too.
Yeah. And then his other point here on what like AI actually did at DEF CON, because it's not like he's not an AI denier, he says, and he wanted to kind of like give a first-hand account of what AI actually did. It wasn't like, they had these capture the flag events, and it wasn't like the winning team just like rode into AI, because they did use AI, right? Like AI wasn't like not, just like we can use a calculator for math, but no one just like typed in solve this CTF challenge into the chat box and then just won, right? Like he wrote here, what the top teams actually did was have knowledgeable contributors use AI to write automation, generate test cases under close human direction. And then the humans did the pattern recognition when the models missed it, which it did a lot. And then if the AI went off course or chased a dead end or hallucinated, like humans with years of exploitation experience noticed within minutes and steered it back. So he said this was the most sophisticated usage that he saw was experts codifying their own methodology into reusable prompts and skills, which essentially compressed a decade of here's how I approach a heap challenge, or here's my triage order for a kernel target into a scaffolding that AI could execute. So AI supplied the speed and volume, but the methodology came from years of human experience.
I love when you talk about things I just said. That's so amazing because I mean, I'm not comparing myself to these genius level security researchers, but same idea I was just making where I was talking about
Exactly.
I needed a decade of experience to build the tool I built. And that's why no one else built it at Microsoft, because there's very few people who have like the expert level knowledge in this system and the other system and how it really works. And same thing, like I was able to watch effectively it's Microsoft Scout, but it's analogous to OpenClaw. I was able to watch it build this, and I was able to steer it back when it would go off course. And it goes off course all the time. It would look at something and then make some wild extrapolation. And I had the sense enough to look at it and go, what are you talking about? Like, this is not that at all. And so there were countless times when I was sitting there going, WTF, man, like, let's get back on track here. So believe me, that human expertise is still very much needed, but man, it sure does help when you can automate broad swaths of this stuff.
For sure. Yeah. And this is a sentence that he wrote here that I will probably take away and reuse in my, everyday life. AI is a force multiplier on expertise and a force multiplier on 0 is still 0. So if you don't know anything, like you don't have that experience, like the AI multiplier is essentially nothing. You can't multiply anything. So
Can you read that again? It's too good not to read twice.
yeah, AI is a force multiplier on expertise, and a force multiplier on 0 is still 0. So
100%. Yep. If I had not known what I was doing, and I'm sure someone else tried to do like the thing I was talking about, it would have blown up in their face. It would have done something hilariously stupid and messed up the whole pipeline if we let it do it.
I know what you're like, conceptually talking about, Adam, but I don't have your experience, and I wouldn't know the firsthand of how to do what you did, or even what it means to like
Being
accelerate your job.
And being able to look at it and go, this is wrong.
Yep.
Intuitively.
So his next point here, I think, is also, kind of talking about attackers and defenders here. So, attackers are going to get AI as well. And like every argument about AI eating defenders' jobs assumes that the threat landscape is going to stay constant, which it won't. And so his point here is offense is accelerating ahead of defense right now, with AI collapsing the attacker's grid the same way it collapsed the researcher. So, we talked about this on last week's show, where we said like the barrier to entry for attackers has collapsed, and this is going to just get worse. And so each time the result was more attacks against more organizations, and a defense industry had to grow in response for that. So there's an economic piece as well. Like every organization has a risk register that's like a mile long and never gets funded. And so code that's never been reviewed, segments that have never been tested, third parties that get a questionnaire and a prayer. So when security work gets cheaper per unit, the realistic outcome isn't the same work done by fewer people. It's organizations buying the security that they've deferred for a decade.
Jevons paradox is what you're describing.
Why don't you expound on that a little bit?
It's just, it says exactly what you're talking about. When something becomes like cheaper on a unit cost basis, people actually buy more of it. And actually the market grows in size, not shrinks. It seems paradoxical, because it feels like, well, if this gets cheaper, people just keep buying the same, and it shrinks. And it's not actually true. People buy more of it then. And so even making something cheaper on a unit cost basis actually expands access to it and expands the addressable market over time. JEVON''S, Jevons paradox. You can look it up. Satya Nadella was talking about it a lot a couple of years ago, as AI costs are expected to, decline dramatically with Moore's law and everything else. And it getting cheaper is not a concern to where, oh, well, it's not going to grow in the way people think. It's like, no, they'll do more of it. They'll add more. And you're saying the same thing here for security. As security gets cheaper, organizations will buy more of it because they have a need for it. It's an unmet need today. And I think that's the overall theory here. And you think of when you reach equilibrium in something. I've talked about equilibrium in patching right now, to where we are going to go through a painful time. And we're seeing this, the August Microsoft Patch Tuesday, 400 vulnerabilities this month, patched again. And it was like 470 last month. I empathize with people responsible for patch management right now. And I am sure it is a very difficult job. And I warned on this show, we're going to feel some pain for a little bit here. It's going to be a painful stretch, because we're not in equilibrium right now. We are effectively running against the backlog of unreviewed code, or code that hasn't had the sophisticated multi-model automated scanning harnesses, Microsoft's M-Dash, run against code bases like the Windows code base, which is massive, and being able to scan against it. And as those scans keep going and you fix one thing, then you, of course, we know this, you uncover another thing. And eventually we'll reach equilibrium when that code base has been sufficiently and aggressively scanned over and over again by automated scanning harnesses. And as it will reach a state in which you've caught all the major stuff. And now you've got, sorry for the corporate speak, you've got the low-hanging fruit at that point. And then your rate of patches will go down with time, because you've got all that stuff that is out of equilibrium right now, because we didn't have these multi-model scanning harnesses till very recently. And where I'm going with all this is then you hit that new equilibrium when now patching falls back into a predictable steady cadence, and we're not having these wild, crazy months with hundreds of vulnerabilities being patched every month. And now you fall into a state where hopefully you actually are shipping the most secure code you've ever shipped. And you have very few patches each month because you've caught it all. And it's only as like incremental updates to frontier models are shipping that you're catching 1, 2, 3 each month. We will get there. I believe that, but we're out of equilibrium right now. And that's also what you're talking about here with like attackers are going to get AI too. Like we're not in an equilibrium state. We are in a state where I think you mentioned on last week's show, and I was talking about the asymmetry of attacks. Attackers right now, their costs have collapsed to use AI generated attacks, and especially like swarm of agent attacks, even where defenders' costs have not really collapsed in the same way yet. It's asymmetrical or it's not in equilibrium. But eventually we'll reach a new like detente in the battle between good and evil, and we'll hit that equilibrium point again. So it's really hard to judge and see the future right now when we're not in steady state. And I think that's a mistake, is to try to guess what the future holds when you're in a very disruptive time. Now, I know that's what people love to do, and we do a very poor job of like holding analysts and people that throw out crazy predictions to their predictions. But that's the state we live in right now. It's people trying to capitalize on the unknowns of the future, and trying to stake their claim and say, see, I said it first. I already said that, which I don't really know what it gets you unless you're like betting on it from a financial perspective, like on Polymarket or something. But like people love to do it anyways, especially on the good old LinkedIn or on Twitter or anywhere else. So just keep that in mind, I think, as you look through like, oh, well, we're cooked because, AI, and you're not really thinking through the fact of we're in a very not equilibrium state right now. So it's very hard to predict where things go from here. But I think defenders are severely disadvantaged right now, which absolutely does not mean we need less people.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to just finish up with his one of his points here, which is what we can actually kind of do about it, right? So if like AI does kind of come for your corner of the field, and he thinks that every domain inside of security is becoming that domain plus AI engineering. So it's not that like the domain itself, like say, security researching or pen testing or whatever, defenders, is that on its own. It's also that plus AI. So not that like AI engineering is replacing those domains. So, and he thinks that there's going to be 3 skills here that lean on top of those domain knowledges that you already have. One is decomposition, breaking complex problems into small verifiable subtasks that AI can handle well. So like you can't decompose a red team engagement or detection pipeline correctly if you don't already understand it deeply, right? So domain knowledge becomes that prerequisite, not the thing that gets replaced. Orchestration is point number 2 here, applying AI to those sub-problems, prompt engineering, building agents, deciding where human checkpoints go, knowing which failures are cheap and which are catastrophic. So your years of experience get encoded here instead of staying locked up in your head. And then finally, maintenance and currency, running these systems, evaluating them honestly, updating them as models and attack surface shifts. So the people who can generate an AI augmented capability working long term and not just demo it once will be rare and expensive. So I think these are really good points to make. I agree with them here that like, it's, in my experience, like I have used AI to augment everything that I have been doing and accelerate. Like I started, at Zscaler in July. I'm learning so much about networking that I have not learned before. Like networking is not my background, but Zscaler is very much a network company, pack files and forwarding, network forwarding and all this other stuff. And talking to network engineers has not always been, I've known enough to be dangerous so that they know that I'll drop like the word subnet or DNS or something like that in a conversation. Like, oh, this guy knows something, right?
Right.
But once you start talking about like MPLS and GRE tunnels, I get a little bit lost in the sauce. So AI in general has helped me accelerate because I'm asking pointed questions, right? I'll read something and I'll be like, I need to understand this more. Go and find me more about this, or I need to, do this in my lab. Show me, exactly, what the steps are and help me test it, right? So I think that, we're a little ways away from like, the sky is falling type of deal. That this was like people need to learn how to use it correctly and how to harness their years of experience into making something that's valuable for them day to day.
I think it's a beautiful point. And keep in mind, if nothing else, there are a lot of people claiming a lot of crazy stuff right now. And guess what they can't do? They can't prove it because they're claiming things that aren't possible. They're claiming things that aren't real. There's a lot of hype right now. And I know cybersecurity professionals in particular have very strong bullshit detectors and are very cynical by nature. And those are the skills that make you good at your job. And so you have a real opportunity here to be the anti over the top, overzealous person and being like, here's what can really happen today. Here are the things they really can accomplish and really can do. Bringing that clear-eyed perspective instead of don't be on either extreme. Don't be the extreme curmudgeon that hates everything and this sucks and this is the worst and everything is terrible. But also don't be Emmett from the Lego movie. Everything is awesome. Like the reality is in the middle, like it always is. And if you can show up with a clear-eyed perspective on, hey, AI is a valuable tool. It doesn't displace my unique knowledge, my unique human capabilities. And I can differentiate myself and improve my career going forward by learning how to leverage this tool in a clear-eyed, realistic, repeatable, supportable way can really set you apart and set you ahead moving forward. And the people who are out running with that, there is a fear of missing out here. And it is real because there's such a wide disparity in talent levels. There's a wide disparity in the seriousness at which people are looking at this. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to be the one who raises their hand and says, hey, I'm using this. And here's the areas where it made a real difference. And here's the things it really can't do yet. And having that conviction to stand up and be like, it still sucks at this is okay. And that's hard to do sometimes, depending on your organization and kind of the fervor at which it's going about. And you look at, you don't have to look further than my employer to where there's been a lot of pullback on certain areas within the AI narrative, where things like Windows has said we're going to pull back on AI experiences and only ship those where they make sense and where they really enhance the user experience. You had the CEO of Xbox, Asha Sharma, say we're committed to not shipping AI slop, and they even killed Gaming Copilot as an example because it just didn't bring value. And so I think we have reached at least the point of the hype curve now, to where it's not just expected, but encouraged to be able to speak up without fear and say, and you're not going to be seen as a curmudgeon, you're just going to be seen as a realist, because you can get a lot of cool stuff done today, but it can't do everything. And that's the middle ground is always a great place to be in life. In almost anything you do. Don't live in the extremes, live in the middle and find the best way to operate on the high end of the middle, but still stay away from those extremes. And I think that's the greatest place to be right now. So what a great piece of writing that Mr. Haddock's put out there in the world. Really, really thoughtful and considerate. And DEF CON is not cooked. I look forward to hearing about DEF CON next year and many years to come. I do hope, based on last week's episode, talking about the Delta flight and the Wi-Fi disruption there, that all attendees are on their best behavior and are presenting the industry in a positive and professional light. But I look forward to hearing about it for many years to come. And the challenges will keep shape-shifting and evolving with time, and we'll have to evolve right along with it. But Andy, when we started this show almost 6 years ago now, it's just, I know we've said it every single year, we worried about running out of things to talk about. And if there's one thing this industry has definitely proven to me over 6 years of doing this show right alongside you, my friend, it's that we'll never run out of things to talk about. We'll never run out of things to worry about. Something will always be falling from the sky. And we just have to take that deep breath, take that sip of water, and then turn the corner and see how we tackle that problem head on.
Great closing there, Adam. All right. Well, thank you to Mr. Haddock for a great piece of writing. I will link that in the show notes so you can read it in its entirety. It's really good. Our contact information will also be in the show notes. If you have any questions, topics you want us to talk about in the future, just email us. Thanks, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.